to keep up with the volume of asylum seekers coming in. So we had to act at emergency speed with emergency contracts, and that's why at H&H, where we operate 11 emergency rooms, we have a standard emergency operating procedure for acquiring contracts like this. Throughout the last year, though, as you noted earlier, we entered into a second contract with Rethink Food, again, supporting local businesses, and they actually were one of the winners of our evaluation process for our RFP for food contracts moving forward. So that all of the 100% of the contracts we've had for our H&H humanitarian centers right now are from local vendors, because it's those two, and then going forward, we have four that we'll be proposing on Thursday.
And are there any impediments? Why couldn't the administration take all of these food contracts, which, well, first of all, let me ask, is it correct that we're talking about a sum along the lines of $500 million? What is the actual amount that the administration is spending on food procurement in the shelter system?
I again can speak just on behalf of H&H, and I'll defer to my colleagues. So the data I'm about to share with you is from our Public Health and Hospitals Board Finance Committee meeting from last week. So to date, for LIC Commissary, we've paid out $42.5 million through October of 2023. For Rethink Food, $18.3 million through October of 2023. That's our spending that's been paid out to date for the two contracts.
But across every agency, what is the overall spend? What is the total nut?
What I mentioned, well, I can't speak to the spend to date, but we have like, for instance, each of those contracts has a ceiling, right, that do not go over. And the total value for prime food contracts for asylum seeker operations is roughly $463 million. The do not exceed. And so what my colleague Ted just explained is that's the number that's been expensed to date.
And that is across all city agencies? Across
the agencies that are serving and providing support through the asylum seeker crisis, DHS, H&H, HPD.
So again, I guess this goes back to the initial line of questioning is why can't, given that, and this is an enormous sum of money that the city of New York is spending. And so on the one hand, the mayor is saying, we're going to cut education, cut sanitation, do all of these decimating cuts, which the council has clearly pushed back on. This is an enormous amount. To bring the price down, why can't you harness the purchasing power across these agencies? You don't have agencies at different per diem price points, and you could drive the price down.
I love the question. I also know from my those meetings that I explained that we attended, the opportunity centers, the meetings that we've had at City Hall, particularly with MNWBE vendors, driving down costs is not possible for all to play. We've got a lot, I think I mentioned 63% utilization in MNWBEs. Not all of them can hit the lowest price point. So whereas I think Ted's language, right, of the do not exceed number is important, but driving the race to the bottom is perhaps not the only way to reach those, the cheapest prices for all to participate in contracts.
Of all of the food contracts that the administration entered into since the beginning of the asylum seeker crisis, what percentage and what is the dollar amount that were no bid as opposed to 3 competitive bids?
I don't have that information right now.
We utilized our existing contracts that were in place prior to the crisis, so...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Could
I'm sorry,
please repeat
my voice
that?
is a little hoarse. No, we utilized our 3 contracts that we utilized were in place prior to the crisis, and that's what we continue to use.
So they were 3 competitive bids. These were pre-existing competitively bid
bids through an RFP process and awarded prior to the crisis.
Okay. And I will add to that, we are also looking, again, with our support from Mayor's Office of MNWBEs, at pressing on those prime vendors to maximize new subcontractors in those agreements. And so, for instance, Whitson's is one that I believe has just entered into some new and exciting small business MNWBE subcontracts with that prime that was awarded competitively several years ago.
Okay, I have actually many more questions, but I want to turn it over to our co-chair, Chair Farias.
Before we turn it over, I just want to acknowledge Councilmember Aviles, Councilmember Brooks Powers, and Councilmember Vernikov, who has also joined us.
Thank you, chairs. I'm kind of at a loss right now. I feel incredibly frustrated with some of the responses that we're getting or some of the lack of information that's been brought to the hearing. I just want to go back just so I can get some clarity and hopefully maybe ask it differently or understand that we do not have these things. Do we have a list of set mandatory food quality standards?
Yes.
Okay, do we have that list available right now for us to see that over every contract, the list of the quality food standards are X and has to be included in every single one of the contracts despite the differences of length or
Yes.
type of food varying times a day?
We are happy to provide you that right after the hearing. It's also, the city's food standards are available on the Mayor's Office of Food Policy website, on the Health Department website, and across all city contracts.
Okay, and then in terms, and I have not looked at them, do the quality food standards explicitly say with contractors, like chicken has to be cooked at X degree?
Yes.
Yes, okay. What happens when, I know we mentioned there's like analysis of food quality, of the contracts, of the types of services provided. When does the analysis and the review of complaints happen and how we move forward?
So I'm going to answer that in two parts. One, annually, in partnership with the Health Department, my office releases a report on adherence to city food standards. That will be coming out later this month, actually, on the previous fiscal year. So adherence to city's food standards. Now, I do want to recall that the new requirement specifically to require client feedback went into place this fiscal year. So next year, we will be raising and elevating that feedback, but it just went into requirement. We're almost at the 6 year, so for 6 months, it has been a requirement, and then we will report on that feedback annually. So we don't have a report to issue that feedback because the requirement is brand new, effective in July.
And contracts are annual?
That varies. In some cases, just to recall, we've got food contracts, which are in short like a grocery list. I need, the Department of Education will say, we need to buy these items, right? My colleagues here are describing meals, so they need meals that meet specific requirements, including temperature controls, time, including cultural relevance, and the nutritional quality and value of that meal. So those are the meal contracts, and some of them, you know, I can't speak, I think, what's your term right now? 1 year, because hopefully we won't be doing this a year from now. But the asylum seeker contracts are entered in for 1 year. In some cases, agencies have 3-year contracts. In some cases, they're 1-year competitive bids. So that is the fact of food procurement.
Okay, so how do we then take the analysis, this report on contracts that are mid-contract or have longer period of time? Do we reevaluate those contracts?
Annually.
No,
The
I understand
nutrition
it's annually,
standards
but I'm
isn't-
saying if I was a vendor and I have a 3-year contract and a report came out and said, my quality standard is not up to par, everyone hates my food, does the city then go back into that contract and say, we're revoking this contract, or do they get to continue presenting poor quality food for the next 2 years?
Yeah, for DHS, we have a team that goes out and constantly looks at the food, looks at, make sure.
We
it meets the
understand that.
standard.
We have
So-
4
so
things of
in
food
the
in front
event-
of us that
so-
people do not
right.
like that are still being served.
So in the event, you know, it's raised to our attention about the quality, we will investigate, you know, the item or the issues that are going on. We will we'll call the vendor in, we'll express our concerns, and if necessary, we'll put them on a corrective action plan that they're required to meet. Ultimately, you want them to improve and give the best quality of service. In the event that they can't meet that standards, yes, there are clauses in the contract that they could be terminated.
How many providers have we put on?
We only have the 3 vendors, and we have not been able to put them on that. Our providers, you know, they have various vendors.
Can you share the names of the 3 providers?
I believe it said in previous testimony, Whitstons, Riviera, and Dahl. What was the last one? It's Regina. What? Okay.
I believe the 3 prime are Whitson's, Regina, and Dahl, DHAL.
For DHS, can you tell me how many people are in this investigation team?
There's a few people, primarily it's our nutritionist that works for the agency and the people that help administer the contract.
So how many people in total in the agency do this work?
I don't have the exact number.
Okay, so we'll follow up with the exact number of how many people do this work. And how often do they go out to do the investigation?
I would have to get back to you on that as well.
Okay.
Since you don't have,
They do go out, often, but I don't have the exact number.
since you currently don't have a survey system, so how have you found out where to investigate and when?
Again, I would have to get back to you on that.
So we'll have to follow up on all these questions. Just for the record, DHS has no system or no avenue of getting feedback or reporting the food quality, and it is unclear how often these investigations are carried out. I'm going to...
One thing, if I may, before you move on, just regarding the prior question of local sourcing, of the MWBE's awarded contracts, which represented roughly $284 million, that represented roughly 161 unique vendors, and all of those vendors are New York City based.
Great, thank you. And just a couple more. In terms of contrasting the bids versus the highest point where they can't go over versus the lower bids that we have, you folks were saying that we are using some of our contracts as leverage to get lower bids or to meet standards. I'd like to know, how are we contrasting the bids that are out there, at least from the same companies, maybe in a different agency or within the same agency, but giving us different price points for the same food standards?
Perhaps I'll start, Chair Ferris. In terms of the leveraging, just to be clear, when I mentioned leveraging, it was regarding leveraging existing contracts,
Right.
as opposed to entering into a brand new.
Well, that's what I'm
emergency
saying. If we have
contract.
an existing contract that they're giving, that we are paying $8 for each meal 3 times a day, and then they give us another bid for another contract at $15, where is the leverage point saying, well, you actually are only getting paid $8 on this other contract for the same length of time? Why are you then now charging us $15? We're not willing to pay that. You're not giving us the lowest bid as you did before. And unless, as a company, and someone has worked in a nonprofit before this, who tried to leverage on multiple points to get the lowest cost per participant on a lot of my trainings, I understand what you're trying to leverage, but what I'm asking is, how often are we doing that and looking at these contracts that have the lowest point, that are giving us good quality, poor quality, mediocre quality food with the same vendor, and then saying, how dare you have the audacity to give us a contract bid at $15, which is almost double the amount, if you're not showing us that packaging has increased, delivery has increased, local logistics has changed the impact of how you're packaging or sourcing this food or delivering this food.
So I would turn to DSS in terms of how they analyze that, because again, it's going to be a process of what are they currently paying, and then what are the conditions upon which they're negotiating again. As we've touched upon a few times, especially when it comes to an emergency contract, you might want to say, okay, here's what you're paying me now for X amount. I need 3 times as much. Can I get it at the same price? And they might say no, of course, for understandable reasons. So I'll turn to DSS if they have any specific insight into how they analyze that. But that exact question, Chair, is a very important aspect of emergency contracting and making sure that you are analyzing that, always.
Okay, the last question I have, since there's no additional information on there, how will the comptroller's revocation of prior approvals for emergency procurements impact future food contracts at city shelters?
So, Chair Ferris, in terms of as I believe Chief Counsel Zorenberg said last week, and OMB Director Jihas said yesterday, the hope is that the disruption will be minimal. Prior approval in standard, so to speak, if it ever could be standard circumstances, can take 1 to 2 days, and we're hopeful that it will not impede the way we go forward. We're hopeful that the controller can continue to be a partner and approve those quickly and efficiently.
Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, we currently don't have emergency food contracts any longer in any of our migrant shelters. That's what I was under the impression of.
Well, at our H&H Humanitarian Centers, we currently do, as we're transitioning now to go to select and go into contracting, assuming the Health and Hospitals Board approves our ability to go into contracting with the new vendors that were selected through the RFP. So just wanted to draw out that distinction.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Brewer for questions.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, starting, and thank you, Dr. Long, for calling this morning. Thank you. More to be discussed, I guess. Number 1 is I understand that health and hospitals, it doesn't have to be as transparent. Do these 2 food contracts that you seem to have that are emergency, do they go through PeopleSoft? And the reason I ask is it's very hard to get those receipts. We've been trying through the Committee of Oversight and Investigations. And my question is, do you get any federal reimbursement through H&H, maybe through others also, for any of this food? Because the transparency on all contracts is poor. So how does it work for the food? You've got obviously 2 here, but how does that work?
Yeah, so thank you, Councilmember Brewer.
Yes, Dr. Long.
So going forward, actually, the most important thing I'll say, and then I will precisely answer your 2 questions there, is if there are ways that we could be more transparent, we'd love to know how we can.
Do you use PeopleSoft?
We use PeopleSoft as we use it for HR, things like that.
But not for food?
Let me double check the extent to which if we use PeopleSoft for food. Okay. The way that our contracts currently are orchestrated is so the LIC commissary, the due diligence for that was based on our 2021 RFP that we administered during COVID, and then Rethink Food, we have that as an emergency contract as well. As we transition to the new RFP selected vendors, we're going to be entering into new contracts with them. For your question around will there be federal reimbursement to us specifically for that, not as far as I know, but I think there should be.
The reason I ask is it's very hard through PeopleSoft, if food goes through PeopleSoft, to get the receipts that would then enable not only oversight from us, DOI, controller, but also for the feds. Nobody can get the receipts from PeopleSoft.
Dr. Long, if I could just add, PeopleSoft is a human capital management software that your team has shared that is now being used currently to process invoices, which is not what it's used for on a common sense. So that's why she's asking if for your food contracts that now you're embarking onto new contracts, will you be purchasing, invoicing, and making payments through PeopleSoft? And if you don't know the answer now, we will follow up for that information.
So the 2 things. One, in terms of the contracts, both the existing and new contracts, for the existing ones, I know that we've shared them with council, and we're of course committed to continue to share.
We need the receipts.
Right, okay, getting there. Any new contracts as well as we have throughout. In terms of the receipts, just to make sure that I give you, Councilmember Juan, a perfectly accurate answer, let me talk to my finance colleagues to make sure that I understand well enough to give you the authoritative answer there.
Okay. 2 other quick questions.
Yep.
Number 2 is Riverside Terrace. This is DHS. 320 West 88th Street. Liani has been very helpful, but just so you know, all the neighbors complain because so much food has been thrown out on a regular basis. Brand new food, et cetera, spilled into the neighborhood. Rats existed. Department of Sanitation complained to me. So my question is, I know how to deal. So I know how to deal with 320 West 88th Street. But my question is, are you monitoring other sites where food could be thrown out? It's not H&H, it's DHS. What's going on? I mean, a lot of food was thrown out.
Yes, we've implemented a food discard report that's self-reporting. We're trying to evaluate that information to determine, the needs of the food, especially if there is waste. We don't want to do waste.
I know people don't want to tell you, though. So how are you really monitoring it? People don't want to tell you. We saw it ourselves. The neighbors complained. Nobody from DHS complained. How are you doing undercover monitoring, if that's the word to be used?
The other thing that we're implementing, as I mentioned earlier, is we're doing satisfaction surveys, to see if the food that is being provided, is being, people are actually eating the food. I think that's part of maybe part of the issue there, that there might be perceived waste. But we're trying to do the satisfaction surveys to help us, guide us in the future.
Okay, that's not the answer I want to hear. I want undercover. I want people to know more specifically. It just, you can do all the satisfaction. People aren't going to fill those out. So, but you do need to be much more cognizant of food being wasted. Okay. Number 3, local sourcing. Everybody knows that's my thing. I want the City of New York to be local sourced. So, do any of these contracts? I guess there are 5 if you add up DHS, H&H. What are we doing? And maybe you answered this, to do local sourcing. It's not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy. But what are you doing for local sourcing for these contracts?
Well, I'll repeat again that on the MWBE front, of the $284 million that's been awarded in that area, which represents 161 unique vendors, all of them are local to NYC.
Yeah, I don't care about local. I'm talking about the farm in, Ulster County. I'm not interested in local. I want
It's a
my
different-
black dirt farms to be purchased, the radishes, et cetera. That's what I mean, local sourcing.
Yeah,
I can jump in.
Okay.
thanks.
So just to be precise, so 2 of the contracts of the aforementioned 5 are mine. So for LIC Commissary, they do source from local farms, specifically Maynard Farm and Orchard, Toigo Orchards, Williams Fruit Farm, Acevedo's Farm, Angel Family Farm, Conoco Farm, and Gorzinski Ornery Farm. And they source seasonal products.
Okay.
From those farms. And then for Rethink Food, that's a different model, as you know. So we source locally from local restaurants for that model.
Okay. And how about DHS? You've got 3 contracts.
Speaking to those 3 contracts, I couldn't tell you what their sources are. I don't have that information currently. I can say that we have reached out to local, in particular, there are MWBE suppliers in the world. While everybody
They're
thinks
black farmers. You can take it from the black farmers. That's fine.
Exactly, and so we've had matchmaking events where we've invited those firms and then put them in one-on-ones with the providers to try to create that relationship.
Do you know if it got created or you're still trying to create it?
Well, I can't speak to the outcome of the matchmaking in terms of contracts for those specific suppliers, but I'm happy to look into it. And
Could you get back to the committee with what it has been successful or not?
Absolutely.
I have a feeling it has not, so I would love to hear about it. Thank you
Happy
very
to
much.
share.
Thank you.
We're going to turn it over to Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you, Chairs. And going back to where you thought Councilmember Brewer was, I do want to delve in on the MWBE conversation, particularly what initiatives exist to provide technical assistance or streamline contracting requirements that might better enable small businesses, especially MWBE businesses, to participate in food procurement. And also, I'm interested in knowing what outreach efforts exist to make food procurement opportunities accessible to small businesses, particularly MWBEs, and is technical assistance offered to small business vendors to help navigate the solicitation process?
The general answer is yes. And so more specifically, as you all know, among the things you learned over the COVID crisis and so on is to create matchmaking and create relationships between vendors and primes, subs and primes, so that when these opportunities come up, they are primed and ready for that. We, at the Mayor's Office of MWBE, we currently not only have weekly meetings with agency stakeholders regarding this particular crisis on what their actual contracts are, and I'll get to the technical part in a second, on their actual upcoming contracts are, and what, if any, challenges they're having in reaching MWBEs as potential partners in trying to provide services to this population. But then, not just the agency, but SBS and our other partner at MOX, we provide information in terms of technical documentation and training for MWBEs on how to navigate the city's procurement system so that they have as good as an opportunity as any other vendor to be successful on getting on these contracts. But again, and I say this from a couple of decades of doing this, it's the creation of the relationships that matter in the long run regarding creating successful MWBE engagements in any endeavor, whether it's a non-emergency or an emergency, and in this case, that's an ongoing activity.
If I could also add on to that, I just want to draw attention to the first time, not the only time, that we will be doing this. The Mayor's Office of Food Policy joined SBS and MNWBE office at the annual citywide procurement fair for MNWBEs at the Barclays Center. And these are seemingly small things, but providing the participants in that with a calendar of when city food procurements are, with those food and meal requirements, the food standards, how to achieve them, and again, those requirements, as we always strive for more and better data collection of, if you want to do business with us, we need to know this traceability into where your food is coming from. So in addition to that, you know, we've for years been having DCAS hosts an annual food expo, but we're changing the timing of it to adhere to actually when, like, you know, DCAS starts doing procurements for correction and for administration for children's services in the summer. So we want to have that expo like in June, so that it's like we know what we're going to buy, and here are people that could be entering into business with the city and tasting their foods and things like that. And then I'm sure Chair Menon is familiar with this, but the NYC Small Business Services team has launched NYC Business Express Service Team, or BEST, the initiative to provide small businesses with one-on-one expert support and streamline the interactions with city agencies. So these are all, you know, chipping away at that effort to help make sure that I think the success of the work that we've done over the asylum seeker crisis permeates into traditional food services across the city.
Just a follow-up question, and what triggered it was when you started to talk about the prime vendors. How is the city working to scale up that, particularly MBEs, right, to be able to access and tap into these opportunities better? How are you creating an environment where MBEs could then become prime contracts as well? And how do you feel like you're doing along that line? Because the city, for it to be one of the most diverse cities in the world, quite honestly, like, we're not seeing that correlation in terms of who's getting the contracts, who's being the primes in New York City, in terms of what the participation numbers are. They shouldn't be as low as they are for New York City. So I'm interested in understanding, how are you working to scale up MBEs, and how are you looking to ensure that they not only scale up, but they become the prime vendors and create that environment to cultivate that?
Thank you so much for that question, Council Member. So I'll say we're doing a couple of things. One, sort of building on what you just heard, we're working with each provider to identify an MWBE liaison. That's a procurement specific or a procurement adjacent person in each human service provider organization who can walk MWBEs through the procurement process. That's key for the technical assistance part as well as the relationship building part. In terms of MBEs specifically, the lists that I mentioned that we are searching and providing to the human service providers, I mentioned they were sorted by zip code. They're also sorted by ethgen group. And so and when we send that out to them, we're pointing to the city's overall numbers, as you've illustrated, pointing out where the city's contracting is falling and asking for their help in addressing that disparity. So that messaging comes through in the resources we're giving them, in kickoff meetings where we meet with them, in subcontractor approval processes. When they give us their list of subcontractors they're going to, we're looking at that with an eye towards the distribution of the city's wealth through communities, through MWBEs or MBEs, as you say.
Can I encourage you to put together like a street team that can go out and engage with the merchants and the businesses? When I worked on the JFK redevelopment, would put out solicitation, but businesses would not be responding to it. One, because it's over. One, because it's over. Not be responding to it. One, because it's over. even really understand what the opportunity is in front of them, and especially as an MBE or getting certified to be designated as one. But we found that when we had those individual conversations, we were able to one by one pull them in. And I think that the city may need to look at it in a more granular level, which I know Michael Gardner is well aware because he did an amazing job at the MTA. But I really would love to see greater participation and also seeing greater primes that are minority businesses that are engaged in these contractual opportunities. Thank you, chairs.
And you'll forgive me for not addressing this, your question about prime contractors. We have talked to the human service providers to ask for their help in identifying a range of contracts. So that's so that they're not necessarily trying to procure huge contracts from small vendors where they're not going to be able to step into that opportunity. So there's unbundling happening at the human service provider level as well. And that provides opportunities for MBEs or MWBEs to come in at the ground level and then scale up using subcontracting as a platform, hopefully moving into city contracting and then moving into priming in both contexts.
Generally, if I may, generally the idea of closing the disparity within the disparity is a key initiative for this administration. From Michael Gardner all the way up to the mayor and everyone across and in between. So we're gathering information as it comes in where those disparities are. We're isolating contracts that fall within that space, and we are reaching out to those communities to encourage them to participate in the opportunities that are not just in front of us now, but those that are upcoming.
And finally, Councilmember, I'm sorry, I did want to highlight, you mentioned the technical assistance, and an initiative that started just in the last year is piggybacking off of the SBS projects of going out there, being in the street, one-on-one technical assistance. Mox has rolled out Mox in your neighborhood, where that is exactly what we do. We stand there with with someone who wants to learn more, wants to get filed a passport, wants to say, where do I go look? It's exactly what we're doing, where we've done, 11 events, almost 300 attendees, 4,500 online, which is different, not as personal, but that is exactly what we want to do. I think under the leadership of Director Flores, Chief Garner, and the mayor, the status quo when it comes to engaging with our MWBEs is not good enough. And we're doing exactly as you say, trying to get that right personal one-to-one touch to make sure that they know this is where you go, this is what you press, this is how you do it.
I would love to have that in my district, so let's connect offline. Thank you.
We're going to hear from Rethink Foods and Queens Together at a later testimony where these nonprofits help small businesses like small local mom and pop shops actually partake, and they help with the assistance of all the administrative duties of going through passport, et cetera, and allow them to be subcontractors if they don't want to do that. But I just want to point out that it's great that we are partnering with MWBEs and we want to continue to increase that, but we need quality assurance. It is not acceptable. For example, the food that's in front of us, if anybody wants to eat it for lunch, be my guest. And if you read it, the label says that there is a shelf life of 1 month. So clearly, Regina's Caterers is producing the food, freezing it, and it's edible for 1 month. And the providers, the shelter providers, are leaving it on the table like this all day long, all 3 meals for people to just take without refrigeration. That is a real problem. So from your perspective, is that part of the fresh local produce provided by the provider that's acceptable for it to be served to human beings?
I can promise you that we will look into this. It is unacceptable to have food staying out on tables that is required to be refrigerated.
Okay, thank you, because this has been raised at DHS by multiple people, multiple times, over the span of multiple years, even before the migrant crisis. So can you help me understand how these 3 primes were chosen by DHS? So is Winston, Dahl, and Regina's Caterers, why were they chosen and how? And which ones are MWBEs and other than Regina's Caterers?
So I do want to just make a quick correction. In fact, the 3 primes are Dahl Stillwell, RC Stillwell.
That's Regina.
Is that? Okay, that's a DBA?
That's Regina.
Okay, understood. All right, thank you. And then Whitson, sorry. So there's obviously a nomenclature issue here.
Okay, got it.
I'll let my colleague talk to the competitive process and the standards that were used to decide the contract.
Thank you. As mentioned earlier, we use a competitive process, the RFP process. We work closely with our ARCO team, our legal team, for the solicitation. Once the solicitations are received, we have an internal committee that will evaluate the proposals. We usually take a range of people throughout the agency, program administration, and other areas within the agency to help evaluate it. Based on the evaluation scores, we will then take the one that scored the highest and bring the contractor in, make sure they understand the terms and conditions of the contract, and what the requirements are. Within the contracts, as mentioned earlier, we spell out the New York City food policy and make it very clear to them what what's expected of them. As long as we feel that they can meet those requirements, then we will go ahead and recommend that they be awarded. So that's what happened with these.
How are you tracking the complaints that you get for these primes, like Regina's Caterers, that has been happening for multiple years now?
As we get complaints, we investigate it and to try to determine what the actual complaint is, if it's founded.
Have you had disciplinary action for Regina's Caterers for the years of complaints that we've received?
I don't have that information in front of me right now.
Because they also have two lawsuits. They have two lawsuits from 2021 and 2023, Segura versus Regina's Caterers, as well as Polanco versus Regina Caterers, June 2023 as well. So I'm just trying to understand, I would like to see your evaluation sheet on how you evaluate your primes that not good faith actor continues to be here, doing business with the city for millions of dollars, and the same way that H&H was able to share with us what LIC Commissary is receiving and Rethink Foods is receiving for their contracts, we would like to see that for your all three primes. And I know that your team is here with you right now. Could you please make sure that you are able to get the information, hopefully right now, on what your caps are for your contracts and why there is such a why is there such a wide range of your food caps per shelter? And I just want to put on the record as well, LIC Commissary for the HPD provider as a subcontractor for food has also received complaints. One of the biggest complaints that we get across the board is, and that was transitioned to Rethink Foods. What we get across the board that we can get the largest complaints about is cold food. So can you help me understand why the requirement is 1 hot meal per day and 2 cold meals for the rest? Because what we're seeing in a lot of the shelters that get large complaints is cold cereal for breakfast. It's like a little container that you see in the grocery stores, a little plastic container with cereal in it, and then milk, sometimes refrigerated, sometimes not, that are just being laid out. And for lunch, it's usually a small PB&J sandwich or bologna or ham sandwich with a piece of cheese. So why is it only 1 hot meal per day?
What I can tell you is that has been the pattern and the norm, particularly in homeless shelters for decades. That is also the case. Let's remove the asylum seeker crisis for a moment. In homeless shelters, the intention is to also encourage the individuals to go out, and whether it's to look for jobs and do other things, that's one aspect of it. But what we wanted to do when we were standing up asylum seeker operations is to ensure a standardization of service across the board. And so we wanted to do that, again, whether it is, a cereal, a bagel, many different things. There's many different menus that are ways to reach that cold meal, and then the 1 hot meal a day. And I also just noting, with efforts to align all of our food costs into making sure that we get healthy, delicious, culturally appropriate foods at a low price point. That is the one thing, 1 hot meal, particularly people need that hot meal to have it feel like a meal, but that was an effort to maintain calories and nutritional needs, but also the hot meals are typically the higher price point meals.
It's difficult for me to agree with the lowest price point because the lowest price point seems to vary so widely even within one agency. So that's the difficulty that I'm having understanding. So could you please just answer, is Winston and Dahl, are they also MWBEs or no?
So Dahl is an MWBE. Whitson's is not an MWBE, but they have a 30% MWBE goal. And to my understanding, subcontractors have been identified in that contract.
Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Councilmember Lee, then Councilmember Menon for questions.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Just a couple quick questions, because there was something that you had mentioned, I think, in one of your answers that made me think of this question. And actually, it's very similar to what Councilmember Brooks Powers just mentioned about the subcontractors and making sure, because, and this is a very, obviously, somewhat different comparison, but when I was running our nonprofit, we did the Meals on Wheels program, and because we provided Korean and Chinese food, we were oftentimes the subcontractors, and even the rates we got as subcontractors per nonprofit was different. And so we actually did hot meals for I don't know, it's not too bad. It cost us $10, $11 a unit, but we only got reimbursed about $5.25, which is below the minimum of the $6 here. So just out of curiosity, how are you ensuring or keeping track rather of the subcontractors? Do you know how many there are? Do you know, because to what Councilmember Brooks Powers was mentioning, it's the MOX and Passport and HHS and Vendex and all that is very complicated, and I know oftentimes a lot of them, even if they want to do the work, they end up dropping out because it's so cumbersome with the system. So it's good to hear that there's trainings that you guys are doing, which is very, very helpful. But in terms of the subcontractors, how are you keeping track of that? And is there something in the actual RFP, for example, that encourages them partnering with various different MWBE subcontractors, and how many, and sorry, my last part of the question is how many meals or units are usually the minimum requirement to be a main contractor versus a sub, if there's any sort of differentiation there?
So speaking for DHS, I can answer some of your questions, and then I'll pass to my colleague for the last question regarding the percentage of meals that make them a prime, I think was your question. So in terms of subcontracting, the prime contract will have a subcontracting cap. That's to ensure that the prime contractor is controlling the contract and not subbing everything out, which can cause its own problems, of course. In terms of encouragement language, yes, there's encouragement language pointing to MWBEs. We also reinforce that at kickoff meetings with human service providers to let them know MWBE is a priority for the agency. Appreciate our commissioner for messaging that down throughout the agency. So all of our kickoff meetings now include some element of MWBE encouragement language and direction if it's a goals contract. I think you also asked, sorry, I think I lost track of your questions.
It's okay, I lost track of my question.
Yes, sorry. And then in terms of the percentage of contracts that would go to, that are required for someone to prime, can you talk to that, Jim?
Yeah, we don't look at percentage of meals, we look at the percentage of the contract. So in particular, with Winston's, they have a 30% goal for MWB, so 30% of the contract, the value has to be, geared towards these subcontractors, the MWB contracts.
And is it that the subcontractors across the board also, how did those rates get decided? Is it left up to the primes? And then also, is it up to the primes to monitor the quality of the food, or how does that work?
The rates in what respect? If you clarify that, please.
So in terms of how much they get reimbursed per meal, how does that work with the subs? And who controls that price? Is it left up to?
Again, when we put out the contracts are bid out per meal by the prime. The prime has to stay within those boundaries. So when the contracts, they hire the subcontracts, the meal price will stay the same, but 30% of the value would have to be provided by the subcontractors, in this case MWBEs. So in the case of Winston's, 30% of the value of the contract would be.
So, okay, so the rate is not slightly higher for primes because of administrative costs or anything like that? It's straight across the board, whether you're prime or sub?
Correct.
Okay. And then also, if you, any of you can jump in, sorry, but if you could also answer the question of who's in control of the quality control of the foods when it comes to prime versus subs?
Hi, I'm Mike Garner.
Sorry, really quickly, you have to be sworn in by the committee counsel.
Sorry. Oh, I got to be sworn in?
Yep.
All right.
All right, could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your responses to council member questions?
Yes, I do.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mike Garner. I'm the City of New York's Chief Business Diversity Officer. And I wanted to expound on your question as to how we are ensuring that there's a diversity and how we are enforcing MWBE compliance. And I'll tell you from a City Hall perspective, we are having weekly meetings here at City Hall with all of the agencies who are buying goods and services for the asylum seekers. We want to know what contract has been awarded the previous week to now, how many of those contracts have been awarded to MWBEs at the prime level and at the sub level, and what's in the pipeline. And so under Winston's contracts, I'll tell you that has been a great success. The Winston's contract, the overall contract was expiring. We agreed to extend the contract. They agreed to have 30% MWBE goals. And the most recent information that I saw, that there are 3 certified MWBEs on the Winston contracts, totaling about $17.5 million. These are neighborhood restaurants that Winston has taken under their wing, and they are assisting them. And so one firm on Dyckman Avenue started their meals last week, and that's 4,000 meals per day. And so we are ensuring that the quality of the meals are diverse, and it's reflecting the actual demographic of the asylum seekers who we are in fact feeding. Yes.
And I just wanted to dovetail off of what Chief Garner was saying from our point of view at Health and Hospitals. So 4 quick points I wanted to make, Council Member. Number 1 is that with our the results of our selections through the RFP process that we're going to be bringing to our board this week, 100% of the 4 vendors are either MWBE or nonprofit. So all of them are either MWBE or nonprofit. What we're doing now is we're at the contract negotiation stage because we haven't been approved for the ability to sign contracts yet. And as part of that, we're putting together, as Chief Garner was saying, a subcontracting plan to focus on MWBE subcontractors with especially a focus on diversity and addressing the difference in difference going forward. Number 3 is we'll be monitoring our the subcontracted entities as part of our usual contract monitoring process at H&H. And number 4, just wanted to draw this point out because I think it's a really important one. You asked who controls quality. The answer at our H&H humanitarian centers is we do. I have a staff member on site 24/7 at every one of our sites without exception. They're managing all of the vendors at each site, so they're the ones that are ensuring quality of food or other services like security, laundry, you name it. My staff is responsible for ensuring quality at all of our sites.
Great, thank you.
And just if I may, Council Member 1, I did want to make a correction. So I've been tapping away under the table right now, and I do want to correct that RC Stillwell does not stand for Regina Caterers. It stands for Riviera Caterers. So they are one of the top 3, and that's apologies for that. We had some.
So Regina's Caterers are not one of
not one of the prime contracts. They're subcontracts, I believe, on several of the provider contracts. But
can you give us a list of all of the shelters that Regina's Caterers is providing and all the subcontracts as a follow-up so that we can understand? And I would also like to know if any disciplinary measures were ever taken against Regina Caterers after endless amounts of complaints that have taken place over the years.
Thank you. We've got that noted and we'll follow up.
Thank you.
Just a really quick follow-up before we pass it to another member. I was just looking at our food quality standards that we have on our city website, and I was just looking at some of the standards for children versus adult meals, and just off of what my colleagues have been stating about some of the foods that were provided for breakfast, like a box of Cheerios with a 1% milk as an option and a yogurt, that's definitely not up to the standards that we have as examples for meals for young people. We have hummus and a sweet potato as a breakfast option, which I would also love that breakfast. So I'm just wondering what is, in our analysis, in the standard determination, looking at what we're getting contracted for the price per point, knowing that we are aiming for the lowest bid, how are we then issuing people or pointing people to our city food standards and then looking at our contracting and making the analysis on this is the quality food product that we are giving to folks in our city.
Thank you for looking that up, and I will also perhaps defer to Ted, but I will say that in the shelters, you know, some are serving families and children, and some are adults, and
Sure.
so the general, I will be happy to provide you with some of the menus that are specifically tailored to the children and families. It's particularly important for me personally, and Ted, I don't know if you want to speak to anything else, but I think a general menu and general standards, certainly, I'm glad you see that again, because it is important in what we're serving adults versus young people. There are differences there.
Yeah, I mean, because I looked up a box of Cheerios, and the fiber in that box of Cheerios is 2 grams, and the minimum that we have here is 7 grams. Sure, with a low % fat milk, that probably adds another gram of fiber, but still not up to the par of the minimum of 7 that we have on our city standard. So.
Actually, the only thing I would add is just to give you a very especially precise follow-up is we'd be happy to share some sample menus from our sites with you. And I think what I would just emphasize is what Kate said, and that as we're crafting the menus, which my staff do with our vendors, but my staff are there in charge of quality, in charge of everything 24/7. We talk about the NYC food standards and we craft the menus together. So if it would be helpful, we'd be happy to share those with you after the meeting.
I would love that. I mean, additionally, and I keep staring at these 4 compartments that I'm glad only one is open to. Like, I don't know anyone in this room, and you know, this is a call to action if anyone would like to take a bite out of it, but I certainly wouldn't, based off of just the smell that hit me. And, you know, I do understand, again, price per point. A hot meal obviously costs more and it takes more to maintain. You know, do we actually know if folks, like how many of these areas, like we don't have refrigeration or enough refrigeration? How are our vendors or maybe the locations themselves asking for additional refrigeration or additional heating equipment or anything like that? Like, I know when I go to some of my shelters, one of the main things we looked at is where were the main communal spaces and how many refrigerators can they actually keep or maintain, how many needed to be purchased. How frequently are we looking at that and addressing some of these issues so food doesn't spoil and go bad?
I also want to point out it's because majority of the DHS shelters in my district, and I know that all throughout the city, continue to remain without a provider because they have not staffed up. Therefore, the only people that you see inside are National Guards. The National Guards are volunteers and they do not service the shelter residents in that way. Therefore, one person from DHS or someone from the hotel is laying out all 3 meals per day outside at the crack of dawn for anyone who wants to grab a meal for all 3 days. And that's one of the problems that we have right now, where the meals are just being laid out because there's no one working at the shelters.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'm sure that we'll follow up on that. It's not acceptable.
Sorry, I'm gonna just dovetail a little bit on the topic, because since we have Mr. Garner here and you brought up the contracts and the migrants. I did have a question in terms of the contracts as it pertains to the commuter vans. So I've gotten a lot of calls from our commuter van owners that are largely based out of Southeast Queens and Brooklyn, people of color, and they shared that a lot of the contracts have been going to non-MBEs and they have not been granted access. I know I have reached out to the admin and had been told that some of these contracts were existing contracts that they, are using for this. But I'm interested to see how are we working to ensure that these commuter vans that they're just as ingrained in the New York history as a iconic yellow taxi cab. How are we investing in that industry and ensuring that they are being able to be included in these contract opportunities?
Yes, for transportation, I would certainly circle back around. I understand that there are conversations going on with DCAS and some of the van owners from Southeast Queens, but I would definitely circle back around with an answer this week for you.
Thank you.
And so we are, and more broadly speaking, we are recruiting MWBE firms across the spectrum for opportunities in selling their goods and services to the asylum seekers. It is my understanding, as data that we ran as recent as this morning, that there's been more than $520 million in contracts awarded to city-certified MWBE firms in various areas. And so transportation is a key area, and we'll be sure to get back in contact with you this week with a response and an answer.
Thank you. We want to make sure these city taxpayer dollars are being spent in Brooklyn and Southeast Queens as well. So I look forward to re-engaging on this.
Yes,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Chairs.
Okay, great, thank you. A couple more questions. What are, for the Mayor's Office of Food Policy, I'm very interested in the audit and review processes that you have in place over these food contracts to make sure that standards are being met, and if they're not, what happens?
Thank you for that question. We actually do not have jurisdiction for auditing or review of the contracts. We are helpful and advisors at the point of developing scope to ensure that the scopes for various procurements, including RFPs and bids, call for the best and the right foods, but we do not, as a mayor's office, have jurisdiction over auditing.
So who does?
I trust that every agency that is managing their contracts is looking to ensure that, again, like as I mentioned, we do a compliance report annually to food standards, but that's different than a broader contract management piece.
And I can speak from the point
Sure.
of view of H&H. So we have a couple of levels of auditing and oversight within H&H. So one is that we have our H&H board. We're a public benefit corporation. Our board, in their oversight function, completes oversight and can revoke any contract at any time if there are quality concerns or other concerns that they would deem worthy of revoking a contract. Day to day, one thing that's very important that we do is I have teams on site that not only are monitoring quality of the food that's provided, but also making sure that, for example, each ingredient of each of the food items is labeled in multiple languages. So if you have an allergy to peanuts, you'd know in English and Spanish, for example, if there's peanuts, they're one of the ingredients in each meal. So each meal is broken down by ingredients, and we make sure that those are posted every day, that they're reliable, that people don't have questions. Another thing that we audit very closely, that my team does at H&H, is consumption levels. So we've worked very hard to achieve, across our 430,000 meals provided each week, a 95% rate of consumption, which minimizes leftovers significantly. And then for the 5% that would be considered leftovers, we donate those to City Harvest or to other organizations, including Coalition for the Homeless.
And in terms of the payment structure for H&H for these contracts, what amount is paid upon contract execution?
So the contracts are based on, again, as Councilmember Brewer was talking about earlier, based on the bills that we receive, and then we pay, and we have a standard process for doing that, which I'd be happy to have our contracts team share more about after the meeting. I can share with you the exact numbers of what's been paid to date, though, if that would be helpful. It's the same numbers I shared earlier, but to recapitulate. So these are numbers that we shared at the finance meeting, which is a public meeting that our board had last week. So to date, Health and Hospitals has paid $42.5 million through October of 2023 based on receipts received to LIC Commissary. And to date for Rethink Food, Health and Hospitals has paid $18.3 million through October of 2023 based on receipts received, and they've been processed and resulted in those payments.
So I guess my question is about, do you, and it's not really just a question for H&H, it's for all of the agency, are there clawback provisions? So when there are instances like we see with Regina's Caterers, when there are serious quality assurance issues, what type of clawback provisions does each agency have, if any?
As I mentioned earlier, if we do have an issue with a particular vendor, we do put them on a corrective action plan that they have to adhere to and attest to. In the event that they don't meet the corrective action plan that was put forth, then we have provisions in the contract where we would, terminate the contract and bring.
Is Regina's Caterers on a corrective action plan right now?
We don't contract with Regina directly.
Who does?
It's the non-for-profits.
So there's really no, so when you have a situation like Regina's Caterers where we've got clear quality assurance, quality control issues, you're saying that there's no recourse? that the city has.
As was mentioned earlier, it's noted, and we're going to follow up and look further into
Yeah,
what
can you
were
help
saying.
us understand for subcontractors, because what you just stated to Councilmember Menon, it sounds like there is no accountability for subcontracts for
Right,
a corrective course of action.
Right, is corrective course of action only for prime contracts?
No, it's the non-for-profits are held accountable. So if Regina caters, we look at the prime contract. So if Regina caters is sub to the prime, we look at the prime. It's not, maybe I'm
So-
said it wrong. So
No.
we look at the non-for-profit with the corrective action plan for Regina caterers.
Okay, and as of we know right now, do we know who subcontracts with Regina and if there has been any corrective action for that prime?
I know there are corrective action plans out there. I don't know if there's specific for Regina.
Okay,
We'd have
can
to
we get a
back to
list
you.
of all the corrective? Okay, great.
So we're going to get a list of all the companies that are currently on a corrective action plan, correct? And can we all, I just want to make sure that that's what we're going to get, because that's certainly what we need to get. And then secondly, how much, for those that are on a corrective action plan, has any money been clawed back by the respective agencies or not?
So we're noting your request. Absolutely, we'll follow up. And to clarify, you're talking about relative to food, shelter
Correct.
procurements, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I just also want to put on the record, since I couldn't get any DHS data, I had to look it up myself. And according to the 3-year agency action plan for Department of Homeless Services from 2021 to 2023 for New York City Good Purchasing Program, I have a question. So for data collection and procurement processes, it says that for your fiscal year 19 assessment status, only 8% of your data was completed and 21% was partial data. Could you help me understand what is being done currently to have data, especially from your own vendors, to increase data completion, like vendors and subcontractors like Regina's Caterers who clearly have quality assurance and integrity issues?
I'll speak to that because that is a requirement that was put in when I came into office, and why we signed this executive order in 2022 was the result of vendors that would not share their data about where food was coming from. So part of the goal of that transparency is increasing vendor compliance year over year. I believe that we are working very closely with them, as well as with, again, I can't remember the split, but it's something like 60% of their food is coming from primes and something like 40% is coming from subs. So working with all of the subcontractors too that are predominantly through human service providers, which makes it more complicated because we don't have a requirement to get, we don't want to overtax and burden nonprofit providers who are utilizing subcontracts with food providers. But I would be more than happy to meet with you and further outline that with my colleagues from DHS.
Okay, so subcontractors don't have the requirement to report to
When
agencies?
they are subcontracted through a human service provider, AKA a nonprofit.
Then they don't have to report directly to the city agency on all
The
their
history
data.
of the traceability of the food that they buy. Because for a nonprofit provider, it's exorbitantly taxing on them as opposed to a food business, as an example.
Okay, and I have a question for Mox. With all the quality assurance and vendor integrity issues that we're having with, especially as we're seeing through the migrant crisis, how is your $1.16 million and $618,000 cut to, or peg to your agency going to impact this work of oversight?
Thank you, Chair One. So in terms of specific budget cuts, I know that there are ongoing discussions with OMB, and I'd have to defer to Director Flores and her future testimony regarding any specific budget cuts. However, I can say in terms of oversight of the contracting process, the procurement process, as we're saying, if there are issues with quality, if there are issues with contract performance, then MOX does maintain the databases, such as where you would have do your responsibility determination, where the vendor is going to do their integrity disclosures, and where the agencies are evaluating performance for other agencies to see. So that functionality exists, and it's there for agencies to use. So if there are performance issues, and I would say if there are specific performance issues with specific vendors, we are also always here. because it's crucially important that agencies know about performance issues that may have occurred in other contracts to inform their decisions. So I would say I can't speak to any specific impact that it would have, although I would say that the vendor integrity, performance evaluation, vendor disclosures, that functionality exists currently.
I have concerns for those pegs, but I'll move on. And I just want to put on the record, since we couldn't get a figure from DHS directly, that according to this New York City Good Purchasing Food Purchase metric from a version that was released on February 22nd, 2023, as of fiscal year 2021, the total food spend from DHS was $73,101,228, and that is probably going to be an increased number with the migrant crisis the last 2 years. And for the overall spending citywide, the total food spend in 2021 was $296,152,385, with New York food spend for local economies being at $92,130,269, and for MWBE spend it was $7,405,726. So those numbers in comparison to the larger spend, I want to make sure that's on record. I think we're gonna move on. No more questions, and I will hand it back to the General Counsel.
I'm just gonna switch it up on us and ask about the winterization bill, because why not, right? Let's end on something a little more light, I suppose, even though you folks don't like this bill. So, just really quickly, Intro 964 would require MOFP to develop and implement a plan to prepare New York City farmers markets for winter weather conditions and year-round accessibility. What challenges do you foresee in executing a winterization plan?
Thank you. We also have been supporting farmers market operators for years, and it has never come up to us specifically the need for or the detail around a winterization plan. So before offering support, we would just like to understand the need so that we can actually speak to that. Grow NYC, which is one of several supporters of farmers market operators across the city, is very actively vocal with us. In fact, we support them with Commissioner Vassan on the Health Bucks program, getting payments processed in time, getting PPE during COVID, and many, many things. So it seems that if there was a need, we just want to hear about it so that we can be particularly responsive. Because again, we've got farmers market. The 20 of Grow NYC's 50 markets operate year-round, and the nature of, particularly in this region, farmers markets is we have less available. And part of the beauty of farmers markets is connecting people with food and with seasonality. So understanding that, we're going to have less in December than we are going to have in August is part of understanding our food system, and we want to support that.
Sure, I'd love to be a part of the conversations on that going forward with Councilmember Joseph. For me particularly, but out of my district office budget, we did $25,000 in health books that the entire Parkchester market length of time, it went the 3 or 4 sessions before that, we were depleted with the amount of need that's coming out of my district. And it's great because that goes right to farmers' pockets, New York farmers' pockets, along with answering for a food desert need of getting fresh produce into people's households and onto their tables. But I'd love to continue those conversations. And the last question I have quickly is, how is MOFP going to be affected by the PEGs, and if at all, would this PEG affect the oversight of MOFP on food procurement contracts, and if it is part of the decision on, furthering on the bill itself on 964?
Thank you for raising that. Like every city agency, we are subject to the PEG. I do not foresee at this point any implications on our reporting and oversight of those pieces.
Okay, and I did see it was about $165,000 PEG from what I saw in the November plan. Is that personnel? Is that, sure?
It's our other than personnel services.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much for answering my winterization questions. And I will now pass it over to Committee Counsel.
Okay, thank you, chairs. This concludes the administration's portion of our testimony. We'll now move to public testimony.
Thank you.
For in-person panelists, please come up to the dais once your name has been called. And for virtual panelists, we will be calling on individuals one by one to testify. We will be limiting public testimony today to 3 minutes each. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should raise their hands, and council members who are here virtually, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and the chair will call on you after the panelist has completed their testimony. For virtual panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant at Arms will set the timer and give you the go-ahead to begin. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. I'll now turn it to my colleague to call the first panel.
Thank you, Alex. All right, I'd like to now welcome up to the panel to speak Matthew Joswiak from Rethink Foods, Zach Khan, Zachariah Khan, Elena Ristovsky, Latoya Meters, Ali Ahmed, and Angel Sanchez. All right. Again, I'm not sure if we have everyone, but that would be Matthew Joswiak, Zachariah Khan, Elena Ristovsky, Latoya Meters, Ali Ahmed, and Angel Sanchez. All right. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Joswiak, would you like to start?
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today about Rethink's food contracting work with the city, providing culturally competent meals to asylum seekers through our network of small business food partners. My name is Matt Joswiak. I'm the CEO and founder of Rethink Food, an NYC-based nonprofit. We currently work in partnership with Health and Hospitals, the Office of Emergency Management, and DocGo via Housing and Preservation Development. I want to thank the entire City Council and Speaker Adams for their leadership on the asylum seeker response, specifically Councilmember Menon for continuously advocating for the small business community. Your leadership has been a bright light for so many entrepreneurs in every borough. To Chair Wan for your meticulous and thoughtful oversight into better contracting processes, and Chair Ferris, Councilmember Powers, and Councilmember Brewer for their commitment to improving the lives of our newest neighbors. I'd also like to thank H&H, Dr. Ted Long, and Chris Keeler for their leadership, constant and candid feedback, and attention to food quality and cultural sensitivity. I'd also like to thank the Office of Emergency Management, Commissioner Zach Iskell and Kate McKenzie, for upholding the commitment to the 10-year food policy plan and seeing small business and cultural competency upheld in our city's food procurement. Additionally, I'd like to thank LIC Commissary for their commitment to quality when it comes to serving our new neighbors. Rethink's mission is to create a more equitable and sustainable food system. During the pandemic, we learned that the small businesses and local restaurants were well equipped to provide culturally celebrated, healthy food that accommodates the religious sensitivities to their community. It doubles jobs in local communities, it increases tax revenue by 25%, and it increases spending in local communities by 33%. And as I'll hear from partners today, it brings a thoughtfulness, passion, and hospitality to the food service that we provide, which has historically been left out of emergency and supplemental food programs. It's been rewarding to see the impact of our model on newly arrived New Yorkers. For example, at the Quality Inn in Queens with partners Brain Food and Chefscape and our partnership with DocGo, we have been able to bring New York City restaurants to serve meals that celebrate the culture of our newest neighbors. We have learned a lot, and we are committed to having an open dialogue with the city and our partners on the ground to continuously improve the way that we serve our new neighbors. To close, Rethink has invested over $32 million of philanthropy dollars into small, minority, women-owned businesses, a few of which you will hear from today. I have the honor of representing a diverse network of small business food partners. You will hear next about the impact of our collaborative work. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, and thank you, New York City Council, for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ali Ahmed, and I am the owner-operator of Brain Food, the Smart Kitchen. We proudly operate in Brooklyn and specialize in crafting affordable, healthy food that isn't just kale and quinoa. I have had the privilege to work with Rethink since March of 2020. They saved my business from closing by allowing me an opportunity to cook meals for numerous CBOs then, and now have helped me grow my business by doing the same for asylum seekers. Through this partnership, we've made over 500,000 meals in this program. We have been able to expand our team, hiring over 25 individuals from the very communities we serve. This not only strengthens our business, but also uplifts local residents by providing employment opportunities. Our employees receive competitive hourly rates ranging from $18 to $25 per hour. Working with Rethink has not only allowed us to grow our business, but has also made a huge difference in our lives as business owners. Yes, it has given us financial stability, enabling us to pay back all the loans from the COVID era, but more importantly, it has pushed us to be better and more responsible with how we give back to our communities. We would like to thank Rethink for planting the seed of philanthropy in us and showing us how we can make a difference in our own way. I am proud to say that that seed has grown into a beautiful tree with many branches now. For instance, every Wednesday for the past 3 years on 34th Street, we feed 200 to 400 homeless and now migrant families hot meals fully funded by our business and PCNY partners. Mayor Adams himself comes to volunteer almost every week and has helped take this project to the next level. Collaborating with Rethink has taken away the biggest barriers of entry for small business to be able to get involved in this kind of contracting work: the paperwork, the administrative tasks, and the lawyer fees. By taking care of that, Rethink empowers us to do what we do best: cooking food that the community would love. I'd like to end by saying simply, this program works. The method of using small restaurants for large contracts is no longer a theory, but a proven model that works. Rethink has handpicked the most resilient, resourceful, reliable group of small business partners that will not let you down. Allowing small businesses like ours to participate not only keeps the funds hyper-local, but it helps us get through unsure times with guaranteed work. This model can be applied and expanded to DHS and health and hospital initiatives. The approach is a win-win, keeping the money in NYC and addressing the needs of anyone in need of food. Thank you for your time today.
Good afternoon, esteemed members of the New York City Council, and thank you for the opportunity to address you here today. My name is Elena Aristovsky. I am the Director of Operations and Programs at Marlowe Bistro and Catering. We are located in Manhattan, but also operate Family Mata in Brooklyn. I stand by you today, not just as an individual, but as a small business who believes in the power of collective action and civic engagement to effect positive change. This is maybe the most important reason for our partnership with Rethink, the belief of rebuilding our community through collective work and support. We first started contracting with the city when the pandemic happened in 2020. And it was only because of one email which was sent to us from Rethink, bringing our attention to this opportunity. I remember thinking, how can we compete for such a big contract? We are such a small business, where will we begin? But the culture of compassion, empowerment, and solidarity that Rethink selflessly shared reminded us of everything we have and everything we are, and how our involvement in providing our food for the people in need can have a significant impact on their well-being. That led to a series of city contracts, one after another, building confidence, agility, retaining staff, new staff hiring, all the improvements that are necessary to fulfill and serve a city contract, and in the same time grow in our very competitive industry. In closing, I want to express my sincere gratitude for the chance to testify before you today and share how much contracts of this scale are important to small businesses like ourselves in providing a sense of long-term stability, planning for the future, investing in growth, and ultimately contributing to economic stability within the local community. Thank you again.
Good afternoon. Thank you for providing me and the many other dedicated food service professionals this platform to share our passion and experience towards these endeavors. My name is Latoya Metters, and I am the co-founder of Collective Fare, and a hospitality services company with 2 eateries in the Brooklyn, and the founder of Collective Foodworks, a nonprofit organization with a focus on sustainable, culturally relevant local food systems, nutrition access for families, and the development of green workforce pathways. From April of 2020 to present, alongside partners such as Rethink, my company has provided well over 3 million healthy, nutritious meals and counting for New Yorkers in need and those seeking asylum in our city. We have also created over 250 jobs and training opportunities through these efforts. My partnership with Rethink has allotted my company and organization the space and resources to provide these services and opportunities, but more importantly, the time to focus on delivering high-quality, culturally relevant food delivery services, as well as provide the ability for those in our employ to grow, thrive, through skills training, certifications, and quality compensation at a minimum of $17 per hour. It is no secret that New York City has been overwhelmed by the influx of migrants seeking asylum and in need of crucial resources, opening 210 emergency shelters, 17 which are large-scale humanitarian relief centers, as well as launching initiatives such as Project Open Arms to get children enrolled in our public school systems, and the Asylum Application Help Center in the city of New York, which assists in getting many of the documentation needed to begin work so that they too may provide for their families and contribute to our great city. However, this story is not new to our city. It is the foundation on which it was built. The continued benefit of empowering partnerships between organizations such as Rethink and small businesses like Collective Fare is crucial to ensuring that New York City residents and those seeking asylum will be fed, employed, educated, and trained, which can ease the demands on its current institutions. Like the many who have come before, they can ultimately create a powerful cycle of prosperity for those who have decided to make New York City their home. Once again, thank you for letting me speak to you all today. Thank you for giving New York City businesses a voice.
Good afternoon, New York City Council. My name is Angel Sanchez, and I am the executive chef at Chef's Guide Kitchen, a small WMDB business. We have had the honor of working with Rethink to produce meals for migrant shelters over the last 10 months. This work has allowed us to hire many employees during times of economic difficulties, as well as provide thousands of meals to those in their need. While on the surface, this has been an amazing experience, I feel it's especially important to tell my story so you can understand how much deeper this work goes for myself and many of my colleagues at Chefscape and Rethink. I originally immigrated to New York from Mexico over 20 years ago. This journey was an incredibly difficult and taxing one. There were many nights I did not know where my next meal would come from. This is a feeling that is hard for anyone to understand who has not experienced it firsthand. During my early days, months, and years in America, I had a dream to not only establish myself in America, but to truly embrace being American and experience the wealth of opportunities this country offers. For me, this is including hoping one day I will be able to give back for all the blessing I have received as a New Yorker. Since making my way in New York, I have worked in a successful New York restaurants, being and work hand in hand with world-famous Michelin-star chefs. However, this opportunity to help thousands of individuals and families is a situation I am all too familiar with. It has not only been the highlight of my career, but has helped me fulfill my journey of embracing the American dream and maybe even more deeply, the New York spirit to its fullest. I want to thank the New York City Council, Rethink, and the other food providers and my co-workers for the work being done to support migrants arriving in this city with so little in their pockets but big dreams in their hearts. I know with the city's support they can go on to do great things as New Yorkers and hopefully one day Americans. I know they can because I was once them, and I believe one day they will be me standing here giving back for the next generation of migrants. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Okay, hi to everyone. My name is Zakaria Khan. I'm the owner of a small business based in Brooklyn, New York, Coney Island Avenue. My partnership started with Rethink in the pandemic of 2020, when it was really hard to come out and even buy your own grocery. And it was those days where we were able to provide hot meals, and especially halal hot meals, to so many residents in the area. There was a time when we were about to lay off 3 of my employees out of 6 because the sales went down, especially in the pandemic. This was the time when the Rethink actually came along, and we were able to keep all of those employees at work, and we were even able to hire more employees because of their contract that was given to us. So over this whole period of time, our small business really benefited from the whole partnership with Rethink. And now coming to this asylum seekers part, my whole team, we are immigrants. And my whole chef and everybody, we are all immigrants. We know, what immigrants would like to eat. And especially, the halal food, because we are certified, halal food providers in the area. So we know how to prepare, what are the restrictions on the halal, preparing the halal meal. So we know this whole, requirements, how to make halal, and also which should be culturally appropriate for the people who want to eat the halal. So we normally, on an average, we serve 8,000 meals a week. And all these meals are prepared by all these immigrant workers. And especially I have hired 3 asylum seekers who came to this country through these borders. They got their papers, and now they are working with me. So the asylum seekers are actually preparing meals for the asylum seekers, and all these meals are prepared by these workers. And the quality that we normally maintain is that, we serve a menu that we serve on a restaurant menu. I mean, this is the menu that we actually, 7 days menu that we serve is the menu that we serve to our regular customers. So it is not really a low-quality meal that we prepare for them. We don't really compromise our quality or the quantity of the food. And I'm pretty much sure, the food that we serve is 100% being used by the asylum seeker because it is made to their taste. And also, we serve the hot meals, which is also liked by these asylum seekers. So from this part. From this whole partnership, what I get is that, with a partnership with Rethink would actually enhance and improve more small businesses, and they will improve more small business owners to be able, and get more business, to do more business in the city. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for your testimony, and I particularly appreciate, as a former small business owner myself, that you all are taking the time to come here. I know how hard that is. I really appreciate you being here. So a couple different comments and questions. As the chair of the Small Business Committee, I am thrilled that small businesses are getting this important work. I wrote to the mayor over a year ago urging him to not utilize out-of-state catering contracts to be fulfilling this work and instead to utilize small businesses. So really happy to see that happen. Can you talk a little bit about how these contracts are allowing you to retain your employees, potentially to hire new employees, given this volume of work?
Would it be helpful just to go down the line and we can all talk about the number of employees that we've hired down the line? Is that helpful?
Sure.
So originally we had about 10 employees that ran the whole shop, but since we started making the meals, we make about 2,000 meals, and now we have a total of about 25 employees, and of them, I would say more than 50% are asylum seekers looking for the opportunity to work.
We first had around 14 to 15 employees. Now we have 32 and still employing every week. And they're full-time employees. And we also, I wanted to say that because of the opportunities and chances we got, we were able to become part of high road restaurants and one-wage fare, which allows us to, pay a fair wage our new employees.
So to date, we've hired over 300 different people through workforce development and training. So what we do is we do culinary training program inside underserved communities, training the students how to prepare food through the culinary way, because our team is a bunch of dedicated chefs. Then what we work along with farms and get the kids trained as far as training to learn how to do growing food. We work along with a few farms, hydroponic and aquaponic farms in New York City. So by being able to build an entire career pathway for many different students. So this has helped us also maintain jobs. Also, we have students that go off to college and then they come back to us during the summertime.
So at Cheesecake, before we started this program, we used to be like 10 employees. Now we are over 40 employees. And thanks to this program, we rehired some of the employees that we lost during pandemic times. So this program really helped us to keep employees at least at 40 hours a week, paying over the minimum wage. That's what I had to say.
Yeah, I had 10 employees. Right now I have 16. So basically I was able to hire 6 new employees, and most of these employees, they were asylum seekers by themselves. So now that is the beauty of this whole thing, that asylum seekers are making meals for asylum seekers.
And are you all making the food on site, or are you utilizing other kitchens?
No, we are. I think we're all making it on site,
On-site.
in between
Yeah,
our
on-site.
services. So while we're still running the full-time restaurant, we find a way to do it in between our service rushes. So
Early in the morning,
Yep.
very late in the night, but it's a collective work, and it's amazing how our staff are like thankful. They understand why they have their job, because it's super unpredictable right now. The sales change, especially, now coming winter time. So they are very, very thankful, and there is a humility in the process and gratitude in the process of making these meals, which is very important, especially because we all come from hospitality.
I'll share a funny.
As far as us, yes, we've been able to, so we have the 2 restaurants, and then now we have just launched a space in East New York, which is a 60,000 square foot space. We partnered with another local nonprofit and 2 other community-based organizations, and are building out a workforce development training program around agriculture, food development, to move towards emergency food hubs to help galvanize communities. So looking at how to create equitable food systems inside communities.
Great, do you have questions? Okay.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time and listening through a very technical conversation with the agencies to advocate for more small businesses being involved in our food contracting or
We
food
appreciate
procurement.
your scrutiny on them.
Thank you.
I was rooting for you the whole time.
One of the main questions that I get asked when we suggest the small business involvement in food procurement is the ability to scale. So it's really great to hear that you're able to do that in addition to your food services. And when we talk about now competitive bidding, because we're moving away from emergency contracts, one of the concerns that you heard from the agency directly as well is that you would not be able to participate. So do you agree with that, or do you believe that now you're able to do bulk purchasing and do catering, that you are able to compete with these other large-scale caterers that are providing that kind of food?
So at the current price point that we're at now, we can definitely compete, and we've been executing it very well with amazing quality food. We are collectively as a group working on creating a buying club for us, so we can all just buy under a certain price point, since we're a collective now with a decent amount of volume between all 10 partners. So I think that's not the problem at all. Leave it to us to figure it out. We are the resilient and most reliable and problem-solving contractors you can hire.
Okay, great.
And especially, I'm so sorry, I just want to point out that Rethink was the platform that enabled all of this. So the way we are all thinking is, I'm not one anymore, we are together. So we share all of our know-how so we can compete, and we really do care.
Well, first off, we wouldn't be providing meals like that. Most of us are trained professionals, and we take a lot of pride in the type of food that we put out, but also understanding that serving food with dignity is of the utmost importance. It was the council member that was speaking earlier about procurement from New York State farms. I personally feel that that is one of the most important things that we can do to create a local food economy by buying food from upstate. There was the Nourish in New York program that we were working on that was happening during 2020 and 2021. That program sort of, not quite sure what happened to it, but I thought it would be a very viable program, and I actually even wrote some menus based off of food procurement from New York State farmers and how that could be used inside of organizations such as Rethink and other restaurants.
You know, as a small business owner, you know what, most of us are immigrants. We are hardworking. Our workers are hardworking. You know, I think we are pretty much competitive. I mean, these large companies, I don't think they can compete with us. When it comes to competition, you know, and being resilient, and especially like, you know, cutting the price down, because we have, you know, these immigrants working, they're hardworking, and I don't think they will be able to, because they have to pay a higher rate, you know, and their expenses are more, their overhead, than ours. So we can actually deliver more for less.
Thank you. I have a few questions specifically for the CEO of Rethink Foods. We are glad to see you here. I know that you were first invited to the September 21st hearing, and we just wanted to ask how you were able to attend this hearing, but you were not able to attend the September hearing.
You know, we're to be candid, we are new at this as a nonprofit organization, and we have learned to go through the right channels. And we appreciate the invitation and the thoughtfulness that you put forward with it, and going through the correct avenues, which we just didn't have before, unfortunately.
Okay. So you couldn't attend previously because you had to go through a channel of approvals internally, or with the city partner?
With the city and with the mayor's office. And so it was actually, we were invited about 2 weeks ago to this. We got the final approval 72 hours ago. So
Got it, from the mayor's office?
Yep.
Okay. And I want to clarify, when Dr. Ted Long was here from H&H, he said that his cap for the contract is $14.40 for his meals per diem for 3 meals per day. And then according to what the OID team found, is for the contracts for your per diem, it's 3 meals plus unlimited snacks throughout the day to feed individuals at the city H&H Hercs. And per H&H contract, the agreement seems to pay Rethink $17 per person for the day of the food. Is that correct? Because we're calculating that according to the contract, payments made to the city to Rethink, it's supposed to not exceed $87,800,000, and that's for 1 year. So we're trying to understand the discrepancy between what he just testified, $14.40, and $17 of what we're calculating.
Sure. In the beginning of the contract, it was an emergency situation, like he stated, and then over time, H&H was extremely thoughtful in bringing it down percentage point by percentage point to where we are today. It's hard to bring the price down to start at 17 and go to 14.40, but they did it in an incredibly respectful way by bringing it down little by little, kind of month over month, and our partners managed to make it all work and happen that way.
Okay, perfect. So now you started at 17 because of the emergency contracts, and now you are able to meet the 14.40 that he stated on the record.
Yep.
Great. And for the new contract, were you just renewed for your existing contract under the emergency, or did you have to go through a competitive bidding process?
We went through a competitive bidding process for the first time as an organization.
Okay, and do you happen to know if there were other vendors, who the other vendors were that competing, or did they not disclose that for you?
Nobody has disclosed other vendors that we know of. I heard of some people that were applying, but that's it.
Okay. And how much have you been paid by the city to date? And how much is still owed to you? Because we are seeing a lot of complaints of money owed that has yet to be paid.
I can't speak to the exact amounts. I think our chief financial officer is here, but the city has been timely and communicative in their payment process.
Okay,
I think
that's
that
great to
they
hear.
understand that we are a network of small businesses and that payment terms are very difficult. Yeah, so they've been communicative and timely in their response.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that because we do not hear that from all of our vendors, especially for DHS. And for H&H in particular, because it doesn't go through the same oversight through the controller's office as well as with the city. You heard both Councilmember Brewer and I talk to H&H about how they are currently processing their invoices through a human capital management system, which is for HR, not for invoicing or payments. So would you be willing to share the receipts and invoices or proofs of payments related to your city contract with the City Council, Department of Investigations?
Could I get back to you on that?
Okay.
Thank you.
And have you encountered, and this is a broad question for all of you, are you encountering any other issues on site in regards to food or anything else that you want us to be aware of for the migrants that wasn't already discussed today?
We'll get to the partners.
Because I also know that for you in particular, you have more than H&H, you have a HPD contract now, and we want to expand that. So you are getting an exposure to a wide variety of migrants who are facing a lot of difficulties and challenges.
So some of the sites don't have proper refrigeration, but in the case when you have like real restaurant people running the show, like we take the extra step of bringing in thermal bags with ice packs. And for the hot food, we deliver the hot food in these hard thermoses and let them keep it overnight, and then the next day pick them up, and you don't even know how many we've lost in the process. But we do it just to make sure that the food stays at safety temperatures and it's not just spread out on the table like that. So they open up just one bag at a time and take out as they need, while the rest of the food will sit in the food safety zone until it's ready to serve. We also gave them monitoring, temperature monitoring probes, so they don't even have to open the basket over and over to check the temperature. It's a probe, you put it in there, and on the outside it'll tell you how safe the food is. So that's what you get when you have, resourceful small businesses doing the job, We don't take no for an answer, we'll figure it out.
How many across the board are you seeing personally of sites without refrigeration? Is it almost all the sites that you provide for, or is it rare?
Emergency ones.
It's a lot of just the emergency ones where they had to turn kind of like gyms into shelters. Those were really, really challenging. For the most part, all of the HERC sites that we work with have proper refrigerations through H&H. Really, it is just the emergency sites in which we provided refrigeration or shipped for refrigeration over there.
Got it, thank you. And lastly, do you have any recommendations for us from everything that you've heard today on how we can improve the current contracting or procurement process to involve more local small businesses into the fold?
I have a very strong opinion on this. I think that what Dr. Ted Long said is actually one of the most important comments. Consumption needs to be measured and needs to be documented. We've seen sites, and I've heard stories of nonprofits across the country where they're finding consumption rates of 10, 20, 30% of the food, which means even if you are saving $4 and bringing it down to 11, you're paying for it 3 times. Because what happens is these individuals, everybody has to eat, so they walk across the street and they go to a local church or they go to some of the other nonprofits that rethink funds and they eat they eat there. And so if we could have a conscious measure of consumption, which I think would have a better sense of where cost should be, because at a certain level of price point, even though it is better for the taxpayer, the consumption rate plummets. And it's really the kind of key metric that I've only heard of H&H measuring.
Thank you. Anybody else with any recommendations? Councilmember Menon?
I think we need more partners like Rethink who can help us get through all the paperwork and let them do the vetting process of the restaurant partners. During COVID, they went through hundreds of restaurants to see who can actually produce and keep up with the production. Like, they have the A-list of the New York City restaurants that can produce meals on demand. Like, they've done the hard work. They've done the research and development to get where we are now. Like, find more partners like this who can deal with the logistical paperwork, lawyer part, and just let us do what we're good at. Making food, chef's kiss.
That is great. So another question I have, you talked very persuasively about how you can consolidate purchasing. You all are working on doing that, and that will obviously drive down the price. As you probably heard from the testimony today, one of our biggest frustrations with this hearing is the fact that these various city agencies do not seem to be talking to each other, do not seem to be standardizing their processes, are not harnessing the city's purchasing power to drive down costs. So I guess more of a question for Rethink. In your dealings with these agencies, have you seen any efforts on the part of the agencies to try to standardize, to try to drive costs down, to try to work collectively on one single process that will lower the price ultimately?
We just started working with HPD, but I would say in H&H, we've had open dialogue with LIC Commissary to focus on that, and it's been encouraged. They made the intro, so it's been encouraged that we focus on this. There's been no direct come together and try to drive prices down through group purchasing, but encouraged collaboration between other food procurement, other food providers.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much to this panel. We really, really appreciate you all being here and taking time out of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for our panelists. And for the next panel, I would like to invite Jonathan Forgash and Sandra Jaquez up. Hello, and thank you. Ms. Jaquez, if you want to start.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Council Committee Chairs Menon, Juan, and Farias, and the entire committee for the opportunity to share testimony today on the role of small businesses in shelter food procurement. I am Sandra Jaquez. I'm the president of the New York State Latino Restaurant Bar and Lounge Association, which is a nonprofit organization representing the interests of hundreds of Hispanic, minority, and immigrant-owned restaurants and nightlife venues throughout the city of New York. As an organization deeply rooted in the community, our members want to participate in the shelter food procurement process in the city, especially given our expertise in providing culturally competent food. However, the shelter food procurement system is flawed and oftentimes cuts us out of the process. While there is an effort to involve small businesses in the shelter food procurement, more needs to be done to ensure those businesses willing and able to provide for the community have access to city contracts. The current system for this type of procurement is incredibly bureaucratic and complex, which prohibits many of our members from participating. There needs to be greater education and transparency into the procurement process to prevent wasted resources, like our members from being cut out of the process. For every dollar spent at a small business in New York City, 70 cents remains in the community. The same cannot be said for large chain stores. By having small businesses provide the food to shelters, not only would most of our vulnerable receive better and more appropriate food, but it would provide an opportunity for significant economic impact to our local communities. As a small business myself, 20 years having a restaurant, I'm just saying that it is extremely difficult to try to get into these contracts. I'm an MWBE myself, and for the last year, and it's been impossible and difficult to try to get these contracts. Just the whole process as to trying to go after these contracts has been completely difficult. I've reached out to every city agency that I can just to learn the process, and it's been impossible to do so. So that's on my personal level, and on top of all our members that we have as well, the same situation has been with them. It's just very hard. And once you do try to get these contracts and you're outbidded by these other sources that have been in this environment for many years, and it just seems to be going to the same people, these contracts just
going to the same 2 or 3 entities, and you know, we just want to have, you know, a say in this and have an opportunity as well, because our businesses are really hurting. On my way down here, you know, driving through my neighborhood, I just saw that in the last 2 weeks, 5 of our restaurants shut down. And I was in shock when I actually passed by one that has been in our neighborhood staple for over 25 years, and it has a for sale sign. I mean, a closed down sale sign. So just wanted to say that. I also want to thank the committee and the entire City Council for their attention on this matter. Our members are eager to assist and provide food to those in the shelter system, and we look forward to continued partnership with the Council and relevant agencies to ensure this procurement process is accessible for small businesses. Thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I am Jonathan Forgash, founder and executive director of Queens Together, a restaurant-driven food relief organization. We started our work in March 2020, just as COVID-19 was shutting down New York City. Restaurants were closing, people were losing jobs, getting sick, and going hungry. We built a system to raise money and pay restaurants to do what they are licensed to do, provide culturally fresh-made meals to the public. We utilized this system to build a boots-on-the-ground emergency response food relief operation and restaurant empowerment program. To date, Queens Together has helped feed over 400,000 people and supported hundreds of restaurants. Today, our business model supports multicultural mom-and-pop restaurants on the road to success and partners with them to provide meals to neighbors facing food and economic insecurity. The small business restaurants of Queens are perfectly situated to provide these culturally appropriate fresh-made meals to shelters across the city. Not only can we match restaurants based on cultures and dietary needs, but our model directs the flow of funding to local restaurants, which will then uplift the economy by way of jobs, goods, and services. We see this work as community building. Successful small business entrepreneurship is a pathway to the middle class for families across the city. These businesses are also a source of job creation and prosperity in their neighborhoods. With every dollar we spend on food relief, meals are provided to people in need, small business restaurants benefit, jobs are supported, the local economy grows, and tax revenues increase. As a former chef and caterer, I know the power of providing people with compassionate culinary care. Working hand in hand with restaurants and community groups across our borough, I see the value of familiar, culturally rich meals to people struggling for normalcy and a sense of home. Thank you for your time.
Okay, I do have a couple questions. First of all, thank you so much for being here. You mentioned how much the restaurants are hurting. Has the city reached out to you at all about trying to involve the association and your restaurant members in some of these food contracts?
Unfortunately, they have not.
Thank you, that's my question.
All right. If there are no more questions, thank you to both of you. And I will call the next panelists, which are going to be online on our Zoom. I believe we have Akram Nasir, Michael Lopez, Ana Cabrera, and Shaitawat Shuntan.
You may begin.
All right. I'm not seeing any of those panelists online. In that case, I will call Elena Barcenas and Daniel Dorado.
Yes, this is Elena Barcenas, and can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank all of you for allowing me to speak. My name is, like I said, Elena Barcenas. I am the owner of Rincón Salvadoreño restaurant in Jamaica, Queens. I have been serving the community for the past 43 years. I'm a member also for the First Latino task force that the mayor established this year. I have asked many officials to assist me in trying to get a contract. I am currently certified with the MWBE, and I have endlessly worked this whole year to try to get assistance to have an opportunity. I am located in 149 Jamaica. I'm surrounded by hotels which have now housed migrants as myself. And I have also had the opportunity working with Mr. Jonathan, and he gave me the opportunity. We actually fed 200, we fed 200 migrants next to my restaurant. And it was the first time that they were able to sit down and have a family meal. And I have endlessly heard how many people have received the food from these big corporations, and their food, the quality of food is terrible. I have always asked for the opportunity. I love what I do, I'm good at what I do. And as of now, I have not heard from anybody back. I've written numerous emails and asking, pretty much begging for the opportunity to keep my doors open. And I am an icon for the community. I belong to different organizations, and I just need assistance. And I would appreciate if someone can really hear, like small businesses like myself, we are struggling, and it's very hard, and it's very hard to compete. I was actually asked 3 meals, and it's impossible. Even though I needed the money, I did the best I could to come down with the numbers, and it's impossible for anyone to feed and to give what people deserve for only being offered $8 for 3 meals, including delivery and so forth. So I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I hope my voice can be heard as a representative of minority women business owners. Thank you so much.
All right, and do we have Daniel Dorado online?
Yes, hi, my name is Jacqueline Tanney, and I am the president of the Migrant Kitchen Initiative, and today I'm going to represent our organization, including our founder, Dan Dorado. Thank you so much for having me here today, and a special thank you to Councilperson Julie Menon for extending the invitation for us to participate, and to Chairs Juan and Farias and members Lee, Areola, Nurse, and Gennaro. We so appreciate it. The Migrant Kitchen Initiative is dedicated to ending the hunger crisis in New York City by reducing food insecurity at the community level. We provide free meals to New Yorkers in need, working with small businesses across the city and ensuring that all meals are culturally relevant and served with dignity and with respect. Our menus are composed with the recipients in mind, and they meet the culinary interests of those communities that we're serving. We started because we were birthed out of a need to feed the most vulnerable among our community during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we started as a small group of restaurant industry friends wanting to make the most out of our time and our food reserve when the city shut down. And so it began as small meals for friends and family, and we quickly grew to New York's largest restaurant quality cooking operation during the pandemic, serving 10,000 meals a day to food insecure communities across the city. And as the hunger crisis continued to worsen, it became really clear to us that services like ours as a 501c3 nonprofit were needed now more than ever. And the food access has really evolved since the pandemic. We've donated 3.7 million meals to date, but we see that food insecurity is hitting particularly hard, as you've been talking about today, to migrant communities. So we partner with organizations to provide daily quality meals. The meals are chef crafted, they're made from scratch using fresh seasonal ingredients. And we approach every menu the same way that our colleagues who spoke today in the restaurant industry, that they do, through taste, presentation, quality sourcing. And we really understand as a nonprofit that hunger across migrant communities often goes unnoticed. those people are suffering, they're often feeling unseen, unspoken for, and that isolation and fear have really been the reality for our migrant neighbors, especially among the asylum seekers here. We want to be here today to testify that nourishing, delicious meals have never been more important, but they also need to be representative. Migrants face difficulties with access and affordability, and with the isolation, they don't often know where their next meal will come from. And that's inclusive of those asylum seekers in the shelter, but also migrants that are in the communities across the 5 boroughs, not in the shelter system as well. And so we want to be sure to together tackle food insecurity and reduce the number of both physical and mental health catastrophes that are a result of the hunger crisis there. We really believe there's an equitable way to do this, and by not only incorporating the fresh seasonal ingredients, but more specifically culturally relevant flavors in our meal design, that is very possible. And we love to do that by partnering with the small businesses, reinvesting in the local economy, and really working with the small businesses that identify with the cultural representation of the communities that we're serving. And we do this also while following good food purchasing standards and Executive Order 8 to
Your time has expired.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your testimony.
All right. If there are no other questions, I will call up our next panelist. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now have Andrew Riggi on the Zoom.
You may begin.
Thank you. Hello, Chair, Council members. Sorry I can't be there in person. I actually just ran out of a meeting to log in to speak because this is very important to us. My name is Andrew Riggi. I am the Executive Director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. We are a trade association that represents restaurants, bars, and nightclubs across the 5 boroughs. And I wanted to speak on the importance of prioritizing small businesses in the city's procurement process. We always knew this was important pre-pandemic. I think we really saw the importance of the city working with local restaurants during the pandemic. And we see it today, feeding asylum seekers and others seeking food relief. Certainly, the city can work with larger organizations to provide these meals, but there is something that is so critically important when the city works directly with local restaurants or intermediary nonprofit organizations to provide those meals to restaurants or to those that meals from restaurants to those that are in need. I'm sure you've heard it over and over again today that it not only brings food to the folks who are in need, but it also supports these small businesses, supports jobs. It also provides culturally relevant and meals to these folks. So it has such a greater impact in this whole ecosystem than just feeding the folks that need the food. We've been fortunate to work with great nonprofits like Rethink Food that does just that and really has worked with local restaurants. Many of them are members on providing these culturally sensitive meals to folks in need when there is an emergency or just on an ongoing basis. So we wanted to come and commit our support to this process and let members of the council know how important it is for these organizations and our local restaurants to be part of the procurement process in so much of the work that you do. We're so committed to this. We actually established the Hospitality Alliance Impact Foundation, a charitable organization, to help amplify the great work that folks are doing. And I think I just saw the Migrant Kitchen speak. They're another example of great work that's happening there, on the ground that we're trying to support through our Impact Foundation. We've worked with organizations like Queens Together, who may have spoken earlier today, by providing grants so they can purchase food from the restaurants to have them delivered to those in need. And I think in today's world where people are always yelling at each other and fighting about different things, I've seen the unity that occurs amongst all different types of people when local restaurants, community groups, and folks in need come together and put aside any differences to meet, this end. So this is really a win-win for all of us. We work
Your
with the Fund
time's
for Public
expired.
Housing recently. Oh, I don't know if I'm muted, but am I muted?
No, we can still hear you.
Oh, great. The last thing I'll just say, thank you. We recently worked in partnership with the Fund for Public Housing to give dedicated credit cards that can only be used at local restaurants to people living in NYCHA that did not have cooking gas during the holidays. And this is another creative way to empower people to support their local businesses while purchasing the meals that they want that are appropriate for them, and again, helps our whole social and economic ecosystem and food relief. So again, big proponents of everything the council is doing and trying to do along here, and we're happy to support in any way possible. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you very much. And I have one other person who's signed up virtually. I'm not sure if she's available online. Susan Marciona. All right. And then one additional panelist in person, Frank Garcia.
You can begin when ready.
First, I want to thank you for allowing me to testify on behalf of the New York State Coalition of Hispanic Chambers, 100,000 members, 26 chambers, and chairman of the National Association of Latino State Chambers. I saw this on TV. I ran from 14th Street to come here because I did not know about this, and this has been something that, Councilwoman, I've been very vocal with Commissioner Kim, and we did a big event thanks to the councilwoman in LaGuardia College, the first minority international event done in LaGuardia College to bring suppliers from Latin America, women that were victims of the FARC and other victims. For the first time, mayors and governors from Colombia came to LaGuardia College to help deal with this immigration crisis. And we were able to get members like the Latino Restaurant Association that just spoke, who I represent, to be able to get them to be able to buy together to bring down the cost. I heard people were saying on the other panel with the restaurants, the issue is that they can't come together to buy. We've created, thanks to Coca-Cola, a buying organization to help eliminate the costs to our members, and most important, create jobs for people not to come from Latin America and to stay. Right now, we have a commitment from the Vice President of Colombia, who's here today in the UN, to work with us, with Commissioner Kim, to create a task force to be able to create jobs for people not to come here. But we need our members to qualify more for the contracts with the City of Food. It's like, to me, our members, the president of the Latino Restaurant Association, I saw her outside, she's very frustrated because her members get certified and they're not getting opportunities to bid. I think especially in areas like Jackson Heights, areas, we have Colombian restaurants that's in the Councilwoman's District and Long Island City that are not certified. What is the City of New York doing to reach out more to my members to get certified? And why we as Chambers of Commerce, Hispanic, and minority counterparts are not being known when these hearings are going on, because it's important for us to have a voice. That's why I saw it on TV. I ran here because we need to make sure my members are part of these $10, $30 million contracts that all these big companies like US Foods are involved and our members don't. And these programs, to end my, to me, it's like certification. It's not a privilege, it's our right. And when we're having issues with people getting certified, I did an event in LaGuardia College, and the city didn't want to send anybody to help with certification. I had 300 Latino businesses, Asian, Hispanics, ready to get certified, and no one showed up. So those are the frustration that we have as advocates, and I look forward to the City Council working with my chamber presidents to really help give more contracts, especially with this immigration issue, and we will be releasing a white paper that the mayors with Commissioner Kim's office and solutions for the immigration crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And that concludes our hearing today. So we will close the hearing.